AITA for questioning my marriage after my wife said she'd choose her ex over me? I'm Scott, 36, and when I married Rachel 8 years ago, I also inherited a family that never fully stopped treating her college ex like one of their own. We'd been together for 11 years, and for most of that time, I could live with it because Cole was married and showed up only occasionally. The problem started when his marriage fell apart, and I caught myself checking whether his truck was already in Rachel's mother's driveway before agreeing to another Sunday dinner. That habit would have sounded ridiculous to me a year earlier. Cole was never some secret figure from Rachel's past that I discovered halfway through our marriage. I knew about him almost from the beginning. Rachel had dated him for about 2 years in college, from around 19 to 21. They broke up because their plans were going in different directions, not because of cheating or some huge betrayal. By the time I met Rachel when she was about 23, Cole was already filed away in the category of old history that had somehow stayed on friendly terms with the family. At first, I hated how normal everyone acted about him. Rachel's dad told college stories that included Cole, Diane asked how he was doing, and Luke treated him more like an old family friend than his sister's ex. But Rachel never hid any of it. She warned me when Cole might be at a cookout, never concealed his messages, and when he married Jenna, nothing about Rachel's behavior suggested she was waiting for him. So I adjusted. I told myself being secure did not mean demanding that everyone erase anyone my wife had once dated. Sometimes a clean breakup really was clean, and families kept people because history overlapped. For years ago, when Rachel's father died, Cole showed up in ways I appreciated. He attended the funeral, checked in on Diane, helped Luke with things around the house, and even fixed a crooked cabinet hinge. He was simply present during a bad stretch, and I understood why Diane's fondness for him deepened. I was there too, going home with Rachel, sitting awake with her, handling ordinary life while grief made it heavier. Cole did not feel like competition then. I was glad Diane had more people around her. For most of our marriage, that was what Cole was to me, a mildly awkward but manageable piece of Rachel's family history. Then, about 4 months before the dinner in the opening, Cole and Jenna separated. Rachel told me at breakfast one Saturday. She said Diane had heard from Cole and was worried about him being alone. There was no suggestion at that point that Rachel had anything to do with the separation. Mom wants to invite him tomorrow, Rachel said. I was making coffee. To dinner? Yeah. Is that going to be weird? I remember shrugging. A little, but not enough to make a thing out of it. Rachel smiled, came around the counter, and kissed my cheek. Thank you. That first Sunday, Cole looked rough. Not movie star tragic. Just tired. He had stubble he usually did not have, and he barely touched dessert. Diane kept putting food on his plate. Luke asked him about practical stuff, where he was staying, whether he needed help moving anything. Rachel checked on him more quietly. I felt sorry for him. When we drove home, Rachel said, I think he really needs people right now. I said, probably. For the next few weeks, Diane invited him almost every Sunday. At first, I thought that was the whole change. More dinners, more family contact, more Cole in the background. Then I started noticing that Rachel was not just seeing him when everybody else did. She would say she was checking in on him. She met him for coffee once because he was having a bad day. Then again because he had to talk through something with Jenna. I did not ask for details because divorce was personal and, at that stage, I still believed there were boundaries everybody understood without saying out loud. The first thing that really bothered me was almost stupidly small. Rachel and I had argued one Thursday about our weekend. We had planned to spend Saturday together for weeks. Nothing elaborate, just errands in the morning and then dinner somewhere, because we had both been busy. Diane called Rachel and asked for help with a family obligation that would wipe out most of the afternoon. Rachel immediately said yes without asking me, and I was irritated because it was part of a pattern where her family plans automatically outranked ours. We argued for maybe 15 minutes. No yelling, no threats. Just the kind of recurring marriage argument where each person can predict the other's position before the second sentence. Sunday at Diane's, Cole was standing near the kitchen island when he said, So, did you two survive the great Saturday scheduling crisis? He said it lightly. I looked at Rachel. She was putting ice in a glass. I was venting. Cole lifted both hands. I know nothing. That was obviously not true because he knew enough to joke about it. I said, Apparently you know the title. He laughed. Rachel did not. On the drive home, I asked how much she had been telling him about us. Not much, she said. He knew about an argument from 3 days ago. He asked why I was stressed. And you told him? She looked out the passenger window. I told a friend I had a frustrating day. That word, friend, became a kind of shield over the next 2 months. I did not object to every text. I did not ask to read her phone. I did not tell her she could not go to Diane's if Cole might be there. I kept trying to make the concern narrow enough that Rachel could not honestly hear it as a demand for control. But things kept shifting. She started putting her phone face down at dinner. Not every time. That would have been obvious. It was gradual enough that I could not have told you when it became normal. She would come home, set her phone on the counter, and if the screen lit up while we were eating, she would turn it over with 2 fingers. Sometimes she took calls on the porch. Sometimes she would glance at the screen and say, "It's Cole," as if naming him made the privacy less strange. One night I asked, "Is he okay?" Rachel was already standing up from the couch with the phone in her hand. "He's going through a divorce," she said. "He needs people who aren't interrogating him." I asked if he was okay. She exhaled through her nose. "You know what I mean." I let it go. That became another pattern. I would ask a specific question and Rachel would answer the accusation she believed was hiding behind it. "How late were you out?" "Why are you tracking me?" "Did you tell Cole about that argument?" "Why do you care who I talk to?" "Are you going to be home for dinner?" "You don't trust me." The more she did it, the more careful I became, because I did not want to turn into the person she was describing. I started second-guessing myself before I even opened my mouth. The first real boundary conversation happened after Rachel met Cole for coffee and came home later than she had said she would. It was not extremely late, a little after 10. If she had been with a girlfriend, I doubt it would have registered. But she had told me she was meeting her college ex, who was in the middle of a separation, for coffee at 7. At 10, when she still was not home and had only sent one vague text saying they were talking, I was angry in a way I had been trying not to be. I waited until she came in. She put her keys in the bowl near the door and immediately read my face. "Please don't," she said. "Don't what?" "Do the interrogation thing. I haven't asked you anything yet. You don't have to." I stood there for a second because even then I remember thinking that if I raised my voice, the whole conversation would become about my tone. So I kept it quiet. "I'm not comfortable with this," I said. "With what?" "Coffee. With you becoming your ex's primary emotional support while he's separating from his wife." Rachel's face changed. "I'm not his primary anything. He calls you late. You meet him alone. He knows details about our marriage. You're checking on him constantly. Maybe you don't call that primary, but it's a lot. I'm not asking permission to have a friend. I'm not giving permission or denying it. I'm telling you what I won't live with." She crossed her arms. "Which is what exactly?" "Our marriage being the thing you process with him. Late night one-on-one time. Private conversations about us with someone you used to be in love with." "There it is." "There what is?" "You decided this was suspicious before you asked me what it was. I am asking you what it is." "No, you're not. You've already decided Cole is a threat. Now you're going to reinterpret everything until you feel justified." I told her that was not what I wanted. I told her I did not think she was property, and I was not going to issue rules about who she could speak to. I also told her that marriage did not require me to pretend I was comfortable with anything she labeled friendship. She said, "You don't trust me." I said, "I'm asking you to act in a way that protects trust." We went in circles for another 10 minutes. Eventually, Rachel said she was tired and went to bed. The next morning, I texted her from work that I wanted to talk that evening when we were calmer. That ordinary text would become important later for a reason I could not have imagined then. At the time, it was just me trying to be the reasonable husband who did not let one bad conversation become a war. The next Sunday, I learned Rachel had already taken the war somewhere else. We were at Diane's table when Diane said, in the middle of an unrelated conversation, "I have never understood marriages that need rules about old friends." She did not look at me when she said it, which made it more obvious she was talking to me. Rachel stared at her plate. I said, "Is there a reason we're discussing that?" Diane gave me a patient look. "I'm just saying secure marriages don't need that kind of thing." "What kind of thing?" "Restrictions. Suspicion. Making someone feel like they have to explain harmless relationships." I looked at Rachel. "You told your mom about our argument." Rachel's jaw tightened. I talked to my mom. That's not a crime. I didn't say it was. Diane stepped in. Cole has been around this family longer than some marriages last, Scott. He was there when Rachel's father died. He was there for me. Treating him like some stranger with bad intentions is insulting. That stung because I had never said Cole was a stranger, and I had never dismissed what he did after Rachel's dad died. In fact, I had thanked him at the time. I said, "This isn't about what he did 4 years ago." Diane replied, "Cole already knows what Rachel has been dealing with. He knows this family." There was a tiny pause after that sentence. Then she added, "I mean generally. Family stress. Everything." I noticed it, but I did not know what to do with it. Luke mostly stayed out of the conversation. After dinner, while Rachel was helping Diane wrap leftovers, he followed me toward the driveway. "I don't want in the middle," he said. "Then don't get in the middle." Fair. I just think Cole's been around forever. Maybe he's annoying, but probably not worth blowing up a marriage over. I looked back at the house. Cole was not there that night, which I remember because by then I had started checking for his truck without admitting to myself that I was checking. "I'm not trying to blow up my marriage," I said. Luke nodded. "I know. I'm just saying maybe don't make him bigger than he is." I thought about that sentence for days. Maybe I was making him bigger than he was. Rachel and I had problems that had nothing to do with Cole. I liked to cool down and solve things privately. Rachel vented first, usually to Diane. I was practical to a fault, and when she felt overwhelmed, I often offered solutions when she wanted sympathy. I knew that about myself, and I knew jealousy could make ordinary behavior look incriminating. So for a while, I tried harder to ignore Cole. That was when the missing 90 minutes happened. Rachel told me one evening that Diane had a leaking sink and needed help. It was not unusual. Diane could handle plenty of things herself, but since her husband died, Rachel had become more involved in small household issues. Sometimes it was actual help. Sometimes it was just an excuse to spend time together. Rachel left after dinner. A couple hours later, Diane texted me, "She's headed home now. Thanks for letting me steal her again." I replied with something like, "No problem. Hope the sink is fixed." Then I watched part of a show and stopped thinking about it. Rachel did not walk in for about 90 minutes. When she did, I asked, "Everything okay?" "Yeah." The sink was more annoying than we thought. She looked tired. She kissed my cheek, took a shower, and went to bed. I noticed the timing did not quite match Diane's text, but I had no framework for it. Maybe Rachel had stopped for gas. Maybe Diane had texted before Rachel actually left. Maybe Rachel sat in her car and called someone. 90 minutes was odd, not proof. And I had become exhausted by the question of whether noticing things made me controlling. So I did nothing. About a week later, Cole started getting bolder. We were all at Diane's, and he made some comment about me being territorial because I moved my own chair closer to the table after he squeezed through behind me. It was barely even a joke, but Rachel laughed too quickly. Cole grinned and said, "Relax. Nobody's stealing anybody." Something in me snapped just enough that I stopped trying to be polite. Then stopped talking like there is something to steal. The table went quiet. Cole's grin thinned. It was a joke. Rachel said my name in that warning tone people use with children in public. I did not say anything else. In the car, she turned on me before we were even out of Diane's neighborhood. "Why would you say that?" "Why would he?" "Because he was joking. About stealing my wife." "Oh my God." He brought it up. I didn't. "Your insecurity is becoming exhausting." I gripped the steering wheel and stared at the road. "You know what's exhausting?" I said, asking a specific question and getting a diagnosis of my personality instead of an answer. Rachel turned toward the window and did not speak for the rest of the drive. By then, Sunday dinner was no longer a family routine I enjoyed. It was something I assessed in advance. Was Cole going to be there? Was Rachel going to sit beside him? Was Diane going to make another sideways comment about trust? Was I going to spend 2 hours monitoring my own face so nobody could say I was acting jealous? I hated what that felt like. I hated even more that I still did not know whether the problem was actually Cole or the version of myself I was becoming around him. Then came the dinner from the opening. Cole's truck was in Diane's driveway when we pulled up. I saw it before Rachel did, or at least before she reacted to it. I remember thinking that my shoulders had tightened before I even turned off the engine. Inside, everything was aggressively normal. Diane had made too much food. Luke arrived late. Cole opened a bottle of sparkling water like he lived there. Rachel moved around the kitchen beside her mother, and for 10 minutes I felt stupid for being tense. Then we sat down. Cole took the chair beside Rachel. At some point during dinner, Rachel and I started talking about our plans for the following weekend. We had been discussing whether to visit Diane on Saturday or keep the day for ourselves. It was not a fight until Cole inserted himself. Diane said Saturday's easier, he said. I looked at him. This isn't your schedule. He leaned back. Just trying to help. Then don't. Rachel frowned. Scott. What? You don't need to talk to him like that. Cole shifted his arm and draped it across the back of Rachel's chair. Not around her shoulders. Not touching her. Just close enough to be familiar, comfortable, and completely unnecessary. I looked at Rachel. She looked back at me like she knew exactly what I was thinking and was already tired of it. I said quietly, Can we step outside? No. Rachel. I'm eating. Diane put down her fork. Luke stared at his plate. Cole kept his arm where it was. I said, still quiet. I'm asking you to come outside with me for 2 minutes. Rachel's face hardened. I'm not doing this every time Cole exists near me. That's not what I'm asking. It is what you're doing. I looked at Cole's arm, then back at her. Rachel said, If you make me choose between him and you, don't assume you'll win. The whole room stopped. I do not remember deciding what to say next. Then why am I still your husband? Rachel gave me a small smile. It was not a happy smile. It was the kind of smile people give when they think the other person has just proved their argument for them. Like I had finally exposed myself as the jealous, unreasonable husband she had been describing. Then my phone vibrated against my thigh. I almost ignored it. I pulled it out under the table and saw Jenna's name. I had not spoken to Jenna privately in years, if ever. Her message said, You need to see why my marriage ended. I did not confront Rachel at the table. That is probably the part of the night I am proudest of because I wanted to. I wanted to hold up the phone and ask her what Jenna meant. I wanted to ask Cole whether his arm felt comfortable where it was. I wanted Diane and Luke to watch the whole thing after weeks of hearing that I was imagining a problem. Instead, I stood up. Rachel looked at me. Where are you going? Outside. Scott. I'm going outside. I did not ask her to come this time. I walked through Diane's front door, crossed the driveway, and got into my car. Cole's truck was parked 2 spaces away. For a second, I stared at it and had the absurd thought that I had spent months trying not to care whether that truck was there. Then I opened Jenna's message. The next few minutes did not feel dramatic. They felt administrative. Jenna wrote that she was sorry for contacting me like this. She said she had believed something Cole told her, and she had recently realized it was not true. According to Cole, Rachel and I were already basically separated. He had told Jenna we were living like roommates and only putting off the formal end because of family complications. I read that sentence 3 times. Jenna continued. She said she had found messages between Cole and Rachel on a shared household laptop while she and Cole were separating. Cole had his messages synced there. She had been trying to remove her own account from the computer when notifications and an existing thread made it obvious what she was looking at. She said she had saved several screenshots because those messages became part of the argument that ended their marriage. Then she sent them. There were not dozens. There was no perfect archive. There was no single message that said, "We are having an affair." What there was turned my stomach anyway. In one exchange, Rachel told Cole that our marriage felt emotionally flat lately. She said I was safe, but that sometimes safe felt like another word for a life where every decision had become practical. She wrote that Cole understood the part of her that existed before everything became obligations and schedules. I had to stop reading for a minute after that one. Not because it proved anything physical. It did not. Because I knew exactly what she meant. I was the person who checked the calendar. I remembered when the insurance payment was due. I wanted to know what time we were leaving. When Rachel complained, I often asked what the solution was. I could see, in the ugliest possible way, how Cole could become the person who heard the version of her life where none of that ordinary responsibility existed. The fact that I could understand the appeal did not make it harmless. Another exchange was shorter. Cole wrote something about how he kept thinking about what happened in the car. Rachel replied that it could not happen again. Cole said he knew. Rachel wrote, "I mean it. We can't do that again." I read the lines until the words stopped feeling like words. Jenna sent another message immediately afterward. I can show you what I saw. I can't tell you what happened when I wasn't there. I don't know if they slept together. Cole says they didn't. I don't know. That sentence mattered to me later. At the time, I barely processed it. I scrolled back up to the dates. The exchange about the car was from the night Rachel had gone to Diane's to help with the leaking sink. My hands went cold. I opened my text history with Diane and searched her name. It took less than a minute to find the message. She's headed home now. Thanks for letting me steal her again. I checked the timestamp. Then I checked when Rachel had arrived home. 90 minutes. I sat in the car with my phone in my hand and tried to think like somebody who was not furious. Jenna's screenshots proved Rachel and Cole were talking about our marriage in a way Rachel had hidden from me. They proved both of them referred to something that happened in a car and agreed it should not happen again. They did not, by themselves, tell me exactly what happened. Diane's text proved Rachel had left her mother's house much earlier than she told me. It did not prove where she went during the missing time. I needed Rachel to answer the part only she could answer. Then I noticed one more thing. The dates on the emotional messages were older than my first serious argument with Rachel about Cole. Not by hours, by weeks. I opened the text I had sent Rachel the morning after our first boundary conversation, the one where I said I wanted to talk that evening when we were calmer. Several of Jenna's screenshots predated it. That was when the shape of the story changed. Rachel had told me that I was turning an innocent friendship into something suspicious. She had told Diane that my insecurity was creating the problem. She had said my distrust was making Cole more important because he was one of the few people who did not judge her. But some of the messages existed before I had said anything. Whatever had happened in that car, whatever label Rachel wanted to put on the emotional part, I had not caused it by objecting to it. I had objected after it had already started. I was still sitting there when another text came from Rachel. Are you seriously just leaving? I did not answer. A minute later, this is exactly what I mean. I almost laughed, but there was nothing funny about it. I wrote back, I'm going home. We'll talk in the morning. She called immediately. I let it ring. Then Diane called. I let that ring too. I drove home alone. Rachel came in much later. I heard the front door, then the bedroom door, then the bathroom. I was lying on the couch with my eyes open. She did not come out to talk to me, and I did not go looking for her. I knew if I started the conversation that night, I would ask every question at once. I would show every screenshot. I would make accusations Jenna had specifically not made. I would turn uncertainty into certainty because I was angry. So I waited until morning. Rachel came into the kitchen around 8. She looked like she had barely slept. I had already made coffee. My phone was on the counter beside me. She started first. Are you going to apologize for walking out? I looked at her. What happened in his car after your mom's dinner? Rachel stopped. It was not a theatrical freeze. Her hand was on the refrigerator handle, and it just stayed there. Then she said, Who told you? I felt something inside me settle in a terrible way. That isn't an answer. She closed the refrigerator without opening it. Scott. What happened in his car? She rubbed both hands over her face. We talked. About what happened in the car. Her eyes snapped to mine. I did not show her the screenshots yet. Tell me. Rachel sat down at the table. For several seconds, she said nothing. Then, we kissed. I stared at her. Once, she added quickly. It happened once. It was stupid. We both knew immediately it was a mistake. I did not yell. I think that made her more nervous. How long? How long what? How long were you sitting in his car? I don't know. You came home 90 minutes after your mom told me you'd left. Her face changed again. You went through my mom's texts. My texts? With your mom. You're checking timestamps now. Yes, now I am. She looked away. I asked, was that the only time you kissed him? Yes. Did you sleep with him? No. Anything else physical? No. I believed that she was telling me what she thought I could prove and no more. Maybe that was unfair. Maybe it was accurate. I still do not know everything that happened, and one of the things I eventually had to accept was that I was never going to build a complete forensic record of my own marriage. Rachel said, I was going to tell you. When? I don't know. I needed to understand what it meant first. It meant you kissed your ex and came home and lied about where you'd been. I know how it sounds. It sounds exactly like what happened. She flinched. Then she started explaining. She said she had been unhappy for a while. She said we had become roommates in some ways, that I handled every emotional problem like a task, that she felt like there was never room in our marriage for her to be uncertain without me trying to organize the uncertainty into something manageable. Some of that was true. That was the worst part of listening to her. She was not inventing every problem. We had become too functional in places where we should have been intimate. I had dismissed some of her frustrations because they seemed solvable to me and endless to her. There were nights she wanted empathy and got a plan. But every time I started to feel the pull of that explanation, I remembered the dates. Rachel said, "By the time you started treating every conversation with Cole like evidence, I already felt trapped." That was when I unlocked my phone. I put one screenshot on the table between us. Her face went pale. "Where did you get that? Look at the date." "Scott, where did you get this? That message is 3 weeks older than the first time I brought him up." She picked up the phone, then put it down like it was hot. Jenna went through his messages. "Look at the date." "That is private." "Look at the date, Rachel." She stood up so fast the chair legs scraped the floor. "You don't get to bring his wife into this. His wife was already in it. They're separated." "And he told her you and I were basically separated too. Were we?" Rachel's mouth opened, then closed. "Did you tell him that?" "No." "Did you tell him we were ending our marriage?" "No." "Did you tell him we were living like roommates and just delaying the paperwork?" "No." I nodded once. "Then he lied to his wife about me while you were telling your family I was creating this whole thing with jealousy." Rachel said, "I never said you created everything. You told your mom I became controlling and that Cole became important because I was pushing you away. I said your behavior made things worse. The messages started first. I was unhappy first. I'm not arguing with that." That stopped her for half a second. I said, "You were allowed to be unhappy. You were allowed to tell me I was failing you. You were allowed to leave me. You were not entitled to start something with him, lie about it, and then use my reaction as the reason it started." Rachel's eyes filled, but she did not cry yet. One terrible decision does not erase 8 years. I'm not talking about one decision. It was one kiss. It was private messages before the kiss. It was the kiss. It was lying when you came home. It was telling your mom I was controlling. It was letting Cole joke about me while both of you knew something had already happened. Rachel looked toward the window. I could feel myself becoming colder with every item in that list, and I did not like it. I also did not know how to stop. Finally, I said, "I need you to stay at your mom's for a few days." She looked back at me. "You're throwing me out?" "I'm asking for space. This is my house too." "I know. If you say no, I'm not changing the locks. I'm not pretending I can order you out. I'm asking you to go because I cannot figure out whether I want to stay married while we're sleeping in the same room." Rachel laughed once, sharply. "You're ending an 8-year marriage over one kiss. I'm deciding what to do about months of lying." She cried then. Not loudly. She sat back down and covered her face. I stood on the other side of the kitchen and felt like a monster for not going to her. I still loved her. That was not remotely in doubt. I loved the woman sitting there crying. I loved the version of us from a week earlier when I still thought we were having a difficult marriage problem instead of a betrayal problem. I loved the family I knew I might lose if this ended. But I could not touch her without feeling like I would be comforting her for what she had done to me. After a while, Rachel went upstairs and packed a bag. Before she left, she stood by the front door and said, "I need you to understand that things were bad between us before Cole." I said, "I understand that." "Do you?" "Yes." "Then why are you acting like none of it matters?" "Because it matters to why you were unhappy. It doesn't change what you did with that unhappiness." She looked at me for a long time, then left. I thought the next few days would be quiet. They were not. Diane called that afternoon. I let the first call go to voicemail, then answered the second because after 11 years I still reacted to her calls like family calls. "Rachel says you told her to leave." "For a few days." "Because of Cole." "Because of what happened with Cole. She told me she got too emotionally close to him and that you have been monitoring her for months." There it was. Not a total lie. A carefully trimmed truth. "She said nothing happened that would justify this," Diane continued. "Then you need to talk to Rachel." "I'm talking to you. And I'm not going to litigate my marriage with you." Scott, she is my daughter. I know. You cannot punish her for having a male friend. I almost sent everything right then. The screenshots. Her own text from the sink night. I wanted Diane to feel embarrassed for every comment she had made about secure marriages. Instead, I said, Rachel knows why I asked for space. I'm not discussing the details with you. This is exactly what she's talking about. You're treating your wife like a suspect. I have to go. I hung up before I said something worse. Luke texted the next morning. His message was calmer. I'm not trying to pile on. Rachel said she admitted she leaned on Cole too much, but that you've been checking up on her for months. Is there any way you two can cool this down before it gets permanent? I stared at the message for a while. Then I wrote, there's more to it. I'm not sending private marriage details around. Luke replied, fair enough. Just don't do anything irreversible while you're angry. That one hurt because it was reasonable advice. Then Cole texted me. I had never given him permission to insert himself into our marriage, but there he was anyway. You can hate me if you want, but she's not property. I read it twice. I did not respond. I blocked him. For the first 2 days Rachel was gone, I told myself I was not going to show anybody the screenshots. I was furious that she had given Diane and Luke a version that made me sound like I had expelled her for being friends with a man. But there was also something grotesque about the idea of forwarding private messages from my wife to her mother and brother. Even if those messages were about another man, even if she had already dragged them into our argument. Marriage was supposed to have some walls. Of course, that thought was almost funny by then. Still, I did not want our worst private conversations to become family entertainment or win a family vote. I wanted Rachel to stop lying about the sequence. Jenna and I spoke again 2 days later. I asked her why she had waited to contact me. She answered without drama. Cole had told her that Rachel and I were effectively separated. Jenna said she had met me enough times over the years to know who I was, but not enough to contact me casually. During her own separation, she had bigger problems than verifying another couple's marital status. She assumed Cole's explanation was ugly but possible. Then, after she and Cole were already living apart, she saw an anniversary post Rachel made with me. I remembered the post. Rachel had put up an ordinary photo of us from dinner with a caption about 8 years married. Nothing romantic enough that I would have remembered it as important. To Jenna, it was evidence that Cole had lied. That's when I realized you might not know, she said. I asked, do you know if they slept together? No. Do the messages say they did? No. Did Cole admit anything besides the kiss? Not to me. There was a pause. Then Jenna said, I don't want to become the person who fills in blanks because I'm angry. The messages were enough for me. They were part of why I ended my marriage. But I can't tell you what happened when I wasn't there. That answer made me trust her more than any confident accusation would have. I asked if she was comfortable with me showing Diane and Luke a few of the screenshots if I needed to establish the timeline. Only the ones I sent you. Yes. And you're not posting them anywhere? No. Then yes. If Cole told them the same story he told me, the dates matter. I thanked her. She said, I'm sorry. I said, me too. That was the whole conversation. Rachel called me that evening. She sounded calmer than she had when she left. I want to have one conversation at Mom's, she said. Everybody needs to stop taking sides. I almost asked which side she meant, considering she was the one who had told them her version before I had told them anything. Instead, I said, I'll come under one condition. What? Before I get there, you tell your mom and Luke that you kissed Cole. And you tell them the messages with him started before I ever objected to the friendship. There was a long silence. No. Then what are we meeting about? Us. With your mom and brother? Because you've made this into a family issue. I actually laughed at that once. I made it into a family issue. You're the one threatening the marriage over Cole. Everybody is worried. Rachel, you told them I threw you out for having a friend. I told them what happened. No. You told them the version where my reaction comes first. The kiss is between us. My private conversations are between us. I am not going to sit there and humiliate myself so you can feel vindicated. That sentence made the decision for me. I said, if they're going to be your jury, they don't get a fake case. What does that mean? It means I'm giving you one more chance to tell them yourself. Don't threaten me. I'm not threatening you. I'm telling you what I will do if you keep using a false version of this to pressure me. She hung up. I sat at my kitchen table for almost an hour before I sent anything. I chose 3 screenshots. No sexual content. No long paragraphs about our marriage. Nothing that existed only to embarrass Rachel. One showed the emotional tone clearly enough that no one could honestly call the relationship casual. One was the exchange referring to what happened in the car and agreeing it could not happen again. The third showed a date weeks before my first boundary conversation. I sent them to Diane and Luke with a short message. Rachel asked for a family meeting. I asked her to correct the timeline before I came. She refused. These are the only messages I'm sharing. They matter because you've both been told my objections came first. They didn't. Then I put my phone down. The feeling afterward was not relief. It was ugly satisfaction mixed with immediate shame. I could tell myself, truthfully, that I was defending myself from a story that Rachel had already spread. I could tell myself I had limited what I sent. I had Jenna's permission. Diane and Luke were already involved. All of that was true. It was also true that a part of me wanted Diane to read those messages and feel stupid for telling me secure marriages did not need boundaries. I wanted Luke to understand that I had not nearly blown up my marriage over nothing. I wanted the people who had looked at me like a possessive husband to feel the same jolt I had felt in the car outside Diane's house. I did not feel morally clean about it, but I went to the meeting anyway. Cole's truck was already in the driveway. Of course it was. I sat in my car for a few seconds looking at it. Then I went inside. Diane opened the door. Her face looked tight and tired. She did not hug me. "They're in the living room," she said. Rachel was on the couch. Luke was in a chair near the window. Cole was standing by the fireplace. I stopped in the doorway. "No." Rachel looked up. "What?" "I'm not discussing my marriage with him sitting here like he's neutral." Cole's expression hardened. "I have a right to defend myself." "From what?" "Your own messages." Rachel stood. "You involved Jenna. Cole has a right to be here." "Jenna isn't here." "Because you already got what you wanted from her." Before I could answer, Luke spoke. "Rachel." She turned toward him. Luke held up his phone. "Why are these dated before Scott's first argument with you?" Rachel closed her eyes for a second. "Because I was unhappy before Scott noticed anything." Luke said, "That's not what I asked." "I know what you're asking. You told me he became controlling, and then you started leaning on Cole because you felt trapped." "I did feel trapped." "Before or after you kissed Cole?" Nobody spoke. Cole shifted beside the fireplace. Diane said, "Luke." But there was no warning in her voice anymore. Just strain. Rachel looked at me. "You sent my brother that?" "I gave you the chance to tell them yourself." "You wanted to humiliate me." "I wanted the timeline corrected. By showing my private messages to my family. You brought your family into our marriage. I just stopped letting you decide what they were allowed to know." Diane pressed her fingers against her forehead. "Stop," she said. Everybody stopped for a second. The room went quiet. Diane looked at Rachel. "Did you kiss him?" Rachel's eyes filled. "Mom." "Did you kiss Cole?" Rachel said, "Once." Diane sat down slowly. Cole stepped forward. "Diane, nobody planned this. We were both in bad places." I looked at him. "You told your wife Rachel and I were already separated." "That was my mistake." "Was it?" "I was trying to explain something complicated. You made it less complicated by lying." Rachel snapped. "You don't get to act like Jenna's version is automatically perfect either." "I don't. That's why I asked you." She stopped. I pointed toward Luke's phone. "The screenshots show what they show. Diane's text shows when you left her house. You admitted the kiss. I'm not claiming anything else." Cole said, "Nobody had an affair. You were both married and talking about being together while hiding it from your spouses. You can pick whatever word makes you sleep better." "That's not what happened." "Then what happened?" Cole looked at Rachel. That tiny movement told me more than whatever answer he was searching for. He finally said, "We were lonely. We talked. One night something crossed a line. Nobody planned this." Diane looked at Rachel again. "What night?" Rachel did not answer. Diane's eyes shifted toward me, then back to her daughter. I could see the memory arriving. "The sink," she said. Rachel's face crumpled. Diane leaned back like she had been pushed. "You left my house." "Mom." "You left my house that night." "Yes." And then you got in his car? Rachel whispered, yes. Diane turned to Cole. Something in her expression had changed completely. It was not because she suddenly believed every suspicion I had ever had. It was because she knew that one piece personally. She remembered texting me that Rachel had left. She remembered the leaking sink. She knew her house had become part of the lie. Get out, she told Cole. Cole blinked. Diane, get out of my house. Rachel said, Mom, don't do this. Diane did not look at her. I defended you, she said to Cole. I told him you were family, and you let my home be used as cover for this. Cole said, I didn't ask Rachel to lie to anyone. Diane pointed toward the door. Go. He looked at Rachel one more time. I hated that I noticed. Then he left. A few seconds later, we heard his truck start in the driveway. Nobody spoke until the sound was gone. Rachel was the first to break the silence. She looked at me with an expression I had never seen before. Not anger exactly. More like shock turning into humiliation. You got what you wanted, she said. Diane whispered, Rachel. Rachel ignored her. You turned my family against me. I didn't make you do any of this. You sent them my messages. After I asked you to tell them the truth yourself. You wanted them to hate me. That was the moment when I could have lied and made myself look better. I could have said no. I could have said I only cared about correcting the record. There was enough truth in that answer that everybody in the room probably would have accepted it. Instead, I paused. Part of me wanted them to know what they were defending. Rachel stared at me. I continued before I lost the nerve to admit the rest. I wanted the lie to stop. And yes, part of me wanted them to feel how wrong they were about me. I'm not proud of that part. But I gave you the chance to tell them yourself. Rachel sat down again. Luke looked at the floor. Diane was crying quietly now, which somehow made the room worse. Rachel said, I told them because I needed support. You told them a version where I caused the thing I didn't even know was happening. I was unhappy before you knew. I know. You keep saying that like it doesn't matter. It matters. It just doesn't make the timeline different. She wiped at her face. Do you still love me? That question hit harder than the screenshots had. I said yes. Rachel looked almost surprised. I was surprised too, not by the answer, but by how immediate it was. I loved her. There was no satisfaction in denying it. I said, that's why I can't pretend this is just a bruise. Diane stood up and walked into the kitchen. Luke stayed another few minutes, then said he was going to give us space. Before he left, he stopped beside me. I was wrong about the order of it, he said. It was not an apology speech. I appreciated that. I know, I said. He nodded and left. Rachel and I did not reconcile at Diane's house. We did not even decide much. She told me she would cut off contact with Cole. I said that was necessary if she wanted any possibility of us working on the marriage, but I did not promise that cutting him off would save it. What do you want me to do? She asked. Right now? Stay at your mom's. Give me space. For how long? I don't know. A couple weeks. We can set practical things up tomorrow. And then what? Counseling, maybe. Maybe. I'm not promising reconciliation because you agreed to counseling. She looked hurt, but she nodded. That night, I went home alone. The house felt wrong. Rachel's mug was in the drying rack, her shoes were by the back door, and her grocery list was on the refrigerator. 8 years of marriage had not disappeared because I discovered a betrayal. It was still attached to ordinary objects everywhere. The next few weeks were less dramatic than the family meeting and more painful. Rachel stayed with Diane. We limited contact mostly to logistics at first. Bills, mail, a couple things she needed from the house. When she came by, she texted first. I made myself leave the room while she packed more clothes because standing there watching felt cruel to both of us. She cut off Cole. I did not ask to inspect her phone to prove it. By then I understood that if our marriage required me to run compliance checks, there was not much marriage left to save. Rachel found a counselor and asked if I would go. I agreed to a short separation and a few sessions. Part of me worried I was only going so I could later tell myself I had tried everything. I told the counselor that in the first session. Rachel looked at me when I said it. The counselor asked, "Do you want the marriage to work?" I answered, "I want to know whether it can." That's not the same thing. Rachel cried at that. Counseling did not uncover some hidden explanation that made the betrayal disappear. It did something more uncomfortable. It showed us the actual marriage underneath it. Rachel said she had been carrying resentment toward me for years in small amounts. Not hatred, not misery, resentment. She said I was dependable, but sometimes being with me felt like living inside a list of tasks that never ended. When her father died, practical life got heavier. Diane needed more help. Rachel felt responsible for more family things. I responded by becoming even more organized because that was how I handled stress. Rachel said there were times she wanted to talk about grief, fear, aging, or whether our life had become smaller than she expected, and I would ask what she wanted to change. Sometimes I didn't know, she said. Sometimes I wanted not knowing to be allowed. That was fair. I told her that I had often experienced those conversations as complaints with no possible answer. I would try to fix the thing because sitting inside unresolved dissatisfaction made me anxious. That was also fair. None of it explained why Cole had to become the person who heard about our marriage before I did. Rachel eventually admitted that was exactly why he was appealing. Cole represented a version of herself from before her father's death, before family obligations, before mortgages and calendars and conversations about whose turn it was to pick up groceries. He remembered her at 20. He did not need her to be efficient. More importantly, he mostly heard her side of everything. He made me feel like I was still that person, Rachel said during one session. I asked, which person? The person who didn't have to think through every consequence before doing anything. The counselor asked her whether she missed Cole or missed herself. Rachel sat with that question for a long time. Eventually she said, I don't know. That was probably one of the most honest things she said during the whole process. I had my own admission to make. By the end, before Jenna ever contacted me, I had started treating every unexplained delay as evidence. Every face-down phone, every pause, every dinner where Cole showed up. I was not tracking Rachel, but my mind was tracking her anyway. I told the counselor I hated the person I had become in the last month before the reveal. I was scanning everything, I said, even when I told myself I wasn't. Rachel said, that's what I was trying to tell you. I looked at her. And you were hiding something. She went quiet. That was the trap we kept running into. Some of Rachel's complaints about my behavior were real, but my behavior had changed in response to things I was correctly noticing, even if I did not yet know why they felt wrong. We could acknowledge both without making one cancel the other. Counseling helped us speak more honestly than we had in years. It did not restore trust. Around the third week of our separation, Rachel told me something I had not asked about. Cole had contacted her through another channel after she blocked him. He wanted to talk about what happened and where they stood. Rachel said she told him there was no they. Then she learned that Cole was not ready to start a real relationship with her anyway. He said he needed to figure himself out after his separation. There was an ugly irony in that, but I did not laugh. Rachel looked embarrassed enough without my help. I think I thought. She began, then stopped. What? I think I thought if this blew up, at least it would mean something. I understood what she meant. If Cole had been the great lost love of her life, then maybe the destruction could be turned into a story about finally choosing the thing she had denied for years. Instead, in ordinary daylight, he was a 35-year-old man in the middle of his own divorce who liked being understood and did not seem eager to inherit the consequences of what he had helped create. Rachel did not immediately come running back to me because of that. I want to be clear about it because it would be easy to tell this story that way. She did not say, Cole rejected me, so now I choose you. If anything, his hesitation forced her to look at the relationship without the fantasy that had protected it. It was easier when it was just talking, she said in counseling. He knew the version of my life I gave him. I knew the version of his life he gave me. The counselor asked, and Scott? Rachel looked at me. Scott had to live in the whole thing. That sentence stayed with me. Diane apologized to me separately. She called about a month into the separation and asked if we could talk. I did not go to her house. We spoke on the phone. She said, I called you insecure before I knew what was happening. I said nothing. Then she said, I defended Rachel because she told me there was nothing to defend. I could hear how much that sentence cost her. Diane explained that Cole had become tied up in her memories of Rachel's father. He had been helpful after the funeral, and she had begun seeing him as proof that some people remained loyal to a family even after relationships changed. I thought I was defending history, she said. I wasn't asking enough about what was happening now. I accepted her apology. I meant it. But when she said she hoped I would come back to Sunday dinner eventually, I told her I was not ready and did not know if I ever would be. There was a long pause. I understand, she said. Luke stayed in occasional contact. He sent me a message once every week or two, usually about something ordinary. He did not become my advocate against Rachel. He did not tell me to divorce her. He also stopped telling me I was overreacting. That was enough. Cole disappeared from Diane's family orbit almost completely. I only know that because Luke mentioned once that Diane had not spoken to him since the meeting. Jenna and Cole continued toward divorce. Jenna never told me their marriage ended solely because of Rachel, and I never claimed it did. Their marriage had problems before Rachel became part of the story. The messages were one of the things Jenna found unacceptable, not the entire explanation for their separation. There was no dramatic downfall for Cole. Diane stopped treating him like family, Rachel cut contact, and Jenna kept moving toward divorce. He simply lost the comfortable position where he could occupy all those roles without accountability. Several weeks into counseling, I realized I had been waiting for a feeling that was not coming back. I kept thinking there would be one session where Rachel said the right thing and I would suddenly see a path forward. Not because apologies erased betrayal, but because I wanted to believe the marriage we had before all of this was still underneath the damage, waiting for us to uncover it. Instead, I kept returning to the sequence. The messages. The kiss. The lie about staying at Diane's. The private complaints to Cole. The way Rachel let me question my own instincts while she knew I was reacting to something real. The way she told Diane and Luke that my jealousy had pushed her toward Cole when the dates showed the emotional relationship was already there. The family dinner where she told me not to assume she would choose me. Then, after I learned the truth, the stripped-down story where I had asked her to leave because I could not tolerate a male friend. I could imagine surviving one terrible kiss. I could even imagine surviving the emotional affair if Rachel had come home after that car ride, sat down beside me, and said, "I crossed a line and I need to tell you what happened." What I could not imagine was trusting the next version of events she gave me when it was uncomfortable for her. So after several weeks, I asked Rachel to meet me at the house. She knew why before I said it. We sat at the kitchen table where she had admitted the kiss. I kept my hands around a mug I was not drinking from. "I don't want to continue the marriage," I said. Rachel looked down. For a few seconds, neither of us spoke. Then she asked, "Is there anything I can do to change your mind?" "No." She nodded once and started crying. I did too. That surprised me more than anything else. I had imagined that conversation so many times that I thought I would be calm by the time it happened. I was not. Rachel said, "I thought counseling was helping." It was. Then why? I tried to keep the answer specific. Because the kiss isn't the thing I can't get past by itself. It's everything around it. You hid it. You lied about where you were. You told your family my reaction caused your relationship with him when the relationship was already happening. Then you let them pressure me with that story. Rachel wiped her face. "I know. I believe you know now. But it doesn't matter." "It matters. It just doesn't mean I can stay married." She looked at me for a long time. "One terrible decision does not erase 8 years, she said again, quieter than the first time. "I know." That was important too. I did not need to decide the whole marriage had been fake in order to leave it. The good years were still good years. Rachel had loved me. I had loved her. We had built routines and traditions and private jokes and a life I expected to continue. None of that became imaginary because of what happened at the end. But a real past does not guarantee a future. We started the divorce process without turning it into another war. There were painful conversations about practical things, but no surprise revenge. No one tried to destroy the other financially. We divided what needed dividing and used writing when emotions were high. The hardest part was losing Rachel's family, not the paperwork. For 11 years, Diane's Sunday dinners had been part of the architecture of my life. Luke had been 20 when Rachel and I got together. I had watched him become an adult. Holidays, birthdays, the first months after Rachel's father died, random Sundays where nothing happened except Diane insisting everybody eat more than they wanted. Those memories did not belong only to Rachel. But after a divorce, there is no clean way to keep your ex-wife's mother as your mother-in-law in practice just because you both miss the old routine. Diane and I exchanged a few messages. Luke and I stayed loosely in touch. I stopped going to the house. Months later, the divorce was final. Rachel asked to meet once after the paperwork was done. We sat across from each other in a quiet place, and she apologized. Not the apology she had given early on, when every sentence had a "but" attached to it. This one did not mention Cole's loneliness. It did not mention her father's death. It did not mention my practical nature, our communication problems, Diane's influence, or the ways I had become suspicious. She said she had been unhappy and had chosen to make that unhappiness someone else's secret instead of bringing it fully into our marriage. She said she lied because telling the truth would have forced her to give up the version of herself she liked when she was talking to Cole. Then, when I noticed something was wrong, she made my reaction the problem because that let her keep seeing herself as the reasonable one. She apologized for the kiss. She apologized for lying about the night at Diane's. She apologized for telling her family a story that made me look controlling when she knew I did not have the information that would have explained my behavior. Then she apologized for the dinner. I knew what I was saying when I told you not to assume I'd choose you, she said. I wanted you to feel unreasonable for asking. I believed her apology. That did not make me want to restart the marriage. I told her, I believe you. She nodded. There was sadness in her face, but she did not ask again for another chance. That was probably the first time since all of this began that an apology from her felt complete, because it was not also a negotiation. Rachel and Cole never became a couple. From what little I heard through Luke, Rachel's relationship with Diane survived, but it changed. Diane stopped automatically stepping into Rachel's conflicts. She loved her daughter, obviously. She just no longer assumed that hearing Rachel's version first meant hearing the whole thing. I became more guarded for a while. I did not come out of the divorce immediately secure in my own judgment. Betrayal trained my attention in ways I had to unlearn. I noticed phones, delays, changes in tone, and sometimes wanted evidence before I had a reason to suspect anything. Before all of this, I thought being reasonable meant enduring discomfort until I had enough proof to justify objecting. I thought patience could protect me from being called controlling. It could not. I still do not think every boundary is reasonable or suspicion is wisdom. I just no longer need unanimous approval before deciding what kind of marriage I am willing to stay in. The first Sunday after everything was formally finished, I was home around the time Rachel and I used to start getting ready for Diane's dinner. I looked at the clock without thinking. For 1 second, I had the old impulse to wonder whether Cole's truck would be in the driveway. Then I realized there was no driveway I needed to check anymore. I put my phone face up on the counter, started making dinner, and let the evening be quiet without trying to decide whether the quiet meant something was wrong. If you like the stories, don't forget to leave a comment and support the channel by subscribing. See you in the upcoming stories.